the crossing analyses of the IT industry and international relations. Welcome to the Tech Geopolitics Unveiled. I'm Rocky Uriankai. Today we're discussing the agreement reached between President Biden of the United States and President Xi Jinping of China in mid-November during the APEC summit held in San Francisco. The agreement involves the establishment of a government dialogue mechanism for the field of AI between China and the US. Why are we discussing this matter? For one, it is indeed related to the themes of our program, the IT industry and international relations. However, more importantly, it is an unexpected development because before the summit, no relevant information was leaked and no one anticipated this development. In the next 12 minutes, I will analyze this issue for you. Who proposed it and why did the other party agree? What does it mean for the two superpowers to establish a government dialogue on AI? How will it develop in the future? However, before we start the analysis at time, the IT industry is changing rapidly. How can we grasp the most accurate and important information in the shortest time? DIGITIMES is the world's most professional Chinese IT industry newspaper. DIGITIMES has launched the mobile version of DIGITIMES to help readers acquire first-hand industry information anytime and anywhere. Check out the video description below for more information about the mobile version of DIGITIMES. All right, back to the program. After nearly half a year of preparation, the summit between Biden and Xi Jinping certainly had some expected content, including the resumption of military communications and export control over the raw materials for fentanyl. Since a country's head of state is the highest-ranking diplomat, their respective staff must have negotiated extensively before the meeting to ensure that when the two leaders meet, it will be a well-executed and achievement-filled encounter. These planned achievements may also be partially revealed to some media beforehand to satisfy their demand and gain media support. This time was no exception. Here we can see reports from British media outlet BBC, one on November 15th, before the meeting, and the other on November 17th, after the meeting. We can see that the two reports have surprisingly similar headlines, containing phrases like, "agree to resume military communications." Therefore, we can imagine that the US has eagerly hoped to avoid accidental conflicts with China as the two nuclear superpowers flex their muscles at each other. This demand has been repeatedly brought up by the White House over the past half year and is finally resolved before this meeting. Furthermore, the increased export control of anesthesia drugs from China may have also already been settled before the meeting. Note that both of these points were requests from the US and hoping to seek China's cooperation. Now, let's examine the White House press release, which represents the official stance. The sections on military communication and anesthetic drug control are clear and detailed and feature a longer section. But then there's the unexpected part of a government dialogue mechanism regarding the AI sector, which is just one brief sentence. The leaders affirmed the need to address the risks of advanced AI systems and improve AI safety through US-China government talks. Granted, a diplomatic negotiation at such a high level wouldn't introduce a topic at the last moment that the other side wasn't prepared for. Therefore, one possibility is that the AI issue was only raised shortly before the summit. Another possibility is that although it was proposed earlier, the two sides didn't reach a meaningful agreement. Which possibility is more likely? Let's take a look at the report from China's official Xinhua news agency. Maybe it revealed some clues. The English version of Xinhua's report is very brief, stating that the two parties agree to establish government dialogue between China and the US regarding AI. All we can confirm from this is that the established mechanism is a government dialogue. This is not as specific as some Taiwanese media interpreted, suggesting the formation of a work group. As for the Chinese version of the Xinhua report, it is much longer at almost 2,000 words. The title is Xi Jinping Holds Leaders Summit with US President Biden. The piece was published on November 16th at 7:25, equivalent to 4:25 in the afternoon on the 15th in San Francisco, not long after the summit had concluded. Considering the time zone difference and the time required for drafting, review and publication, such a detailed report is likely not a real-time interview from the site, but rather a press release written in advance based on known agendas or results. This aligns with what we mentioned earlier, that information was shared with some media. However, in China, the party controls the media. The media adheres to the party's central propaganda guidelines and themes. The completed content of the report will only be made public after the event, but they already know the content in advance. Now, if my inference is correct, does the Chinese PR by Xinhua contain the topic of AI? Yes, it does. And it's not just a brief sentence showing that AI is likely an issue that was proposed before the summit. However, its content differs significantly from the White House's statement. Xinhua's Chinese report starts with Xi Jinping pointed out, and the main topic is that for this San Francisco summit, China and the US should have a new vision and work together to build the 5 pillars of China-US relations. 5 pillars. Among them, AI is the 3rd pillar, with the subtitle Promoting Mutually Beneficial Cooperation. And pay attention, the Chinese side emphasizes mutually beneficial. Here's the original text. China and the US have widespread common interests in many sectors, including traditional areas such as economy and trade, agriculture, as well as emerging sectors like climate change and AI. The two sides should make full use of mechanisms re-established or established in diplomacy, economy, finance, business and agriculture to carry out cooperation in areas such as drug control, judicial law enforcement, AI and technology. Take note, it ends with cooperation again. The wording in Xinhua's Chinese report clearly reveals an expectation for cooperation, citing common interests between China and the US as the reason. This is clearly different from the emphasis on AI risks and AI security in the White House's press release. Therefore, we have to ask, what are the AI risks or AI security the US is referring to? Let's take a look at reports from several Western media outlets to find some clues, since these reports are not all just copying the White House's press release. Diligent journalists will utilize their investigative skills, inquire with officials who participated in the summit, and provide different levels of emphasis and details based on their judgments. So any deviations from the official PR's terminology are the clues we're looking for. First, let's look at the relatively rigid Washington Post. It referred to the AI issue as a major issue still boiling. What's the issue? On the control over cutting-edge artificial intelligence and access to the technology necessary to develop it. This seems to echo the US Commerce Department's chip export restrictions announced on October 17th, a topic discussed in a previous episode, so we won't go into detail here. Viewers who are interested in this topic can refer to the episode titled Computing Power is National Power. However, the Washington Post still doesn't explicitly explain the underlying reasons or concerns behind the White House's emphasis on the AI issue. Next, let's look at Reuters' report, which points out a key aspect. Reuters stated the two leaders also discussed artificial intelligence, AI, and agreed that AI was used in military or nuclear operations. It created real risks. It added that this information came from a senior US official who stated that both sides were very much focused on practices regarding AI that could be dangerous or destabilizing, but not ready for any mutual declaration. This makes it clear that both sides acknowledge the problem, but specifics are still unclear. It's also worth noting that China's news reports emphasize both sides, since its main readers are domestic citizens. China wants them to believe that, look, the US is also agreeing with our viewpoints. Similarly, when US officials are revealing information to the media, they also tend to stress both sides, when their true emphasis is on their own priorities and hoping that their domestic audience can believe the issue's critical nature. Thus, we have reason to believe that among the countless applications of AI, the US might be most concerned about its use in military and potentially even nuclear contexts, rather than AI's commercial applications within China, such as social media platforms, online shopping, ordering food, or ride-sharing services. Military communication and anesthetic drug control were both proposed by the US side, but it's clear that China is not against them, or else they wouldn't have been included as part of the agreement. However, China is absolutely not required to play nice and go along with the US. We're talking about a competition between two superpowers. Every inch matters. Every diplomatic negotiation is a struggle to get a little bit more for your side. If one side made requests, the other side needed to get something in return, right? If so, what does China want? Let's think about it for 3 seconds, and do note it has to be something related to AI. 1, 2, 3. If you still have no idea, here's a hint. At this current stage, in the field of AI, who is stronger on average between China and the US? In early spring last year, Dr. Wang Zuisi, director of the Institute for International and Strategic Studies at China's Peking University, PKU, published a report that was quickly removed from the internet. In it, he pointed out that after the decoupling of US and China's technology sectors, both sides have suffered damages, but China paid the higher price. In particular, chip manufacturing, AI, and the IT industry are now stuck in a bottleneck. This essentially admitted that China's AI capabilities are lagging behind the US. Let's look at another fact. After the US Department of Commerce's BIS issued export restrictions on AI chips on October 7th last year and October 17th this year, China's leading foundry, SMIC, was unable to produce sufficient quantities of the most advanced logic chips. This led to a sharp price increase of computing chips from US companies such as Nvidia, Intel, and AMD in the Chinese market. In the past 2 months, Huawei's launch of the Mate 60 smartphone and the sales of a small number of high computing chips to Baidu have proved that China's high-end chip manufacturing technology has made a breakthrough. We've talked about this in previous episodes of this show. However, that only addressed the quality issue. In terms of the quantity required by the market, China's average AI technology still has to rely on a sufficient number of high-end chips to drive it. This is the US's trump card for slowing down the development of China's AI. It just won't sell high-end chips to China. The same idea applies to the sales of high-end chip manufacturing equipment. Therefore, if the reality is that China's AI development still needs the US to play nice for the time being, China has the motive to use the establishment of this intergovernmental dialogue platform to ask the US to slightly relax the sanctions on China's high-end tech products. For instance, it could ask the US to lift sanctions on institutes and companies that don't support the People's Liberation Army, PLA. In fact, one such relaxation did occur after the summit. However, according to the Washington Post's headline, US and China agree on pandas, but not computer chips. This means that while this summit has eased and cooled down the previous conflict between the US and China, that's all it is, a cool down. In terms of tech products and technology exports like chips, there is no relaxation at all. These are my inferences. Thank you for listening. Regardless of whether my inference is correct or not, what is certain is that following the semiconductor industry, the Biden administration has opened up a new battlefield in AI, because AI is directly related to the military power of the US and China. And military power is one of the most important elements of national power. It will certainly be the hottest focal point in the technology war between the US and China in the future. We shall continue to observe. That's it for today's episode of Tech Geopolitics Unveiled. New episodes of our show will be available once every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. Please watch, share, comment, and like the video. Also, subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you receive notifications when we update. I'm Rocky Urienkai. See you next time.